Hi, I'm Andy McGinnis, Technical Instructor for MIT's Integrated Design and Management program. Today's workshop is on cold molding, which is, we do it at the same time we do the composite workshop because they are related. Wood fibers have long been used in conjunction with adhesives, things like that, to become a composite structure. And wood fibers are among the most affordable and well-known fibers there are for doing things like building boats. And in World War II, they built airplanes out of basically plywood. So this workshop is about taking thin strips of wood that are really thin, a millimeter or less, and turning it into a solid piece of wood using the same epoxy that we used in with the bowl doing the fiberglass. Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do this in layers and not just bend it? If you bought a piece of wood this size and tried to bend it, you'd find very quickly that it'll break. So long ago, they discovered that you can use steam and heat to bend wood. And that's one method of doing things called hot molding. A variant of that is using the thin veneers with a thermoset glue that takes a lot of heat to set, so that you put it, those things are typically like the Eames chair, where they would put things, they'd have a two-sided mold, they put the wood veneers in there with a glue that reacts to heat, and the heat would help the wood bend and stay there, and the heat would cure the glue. Okay. Glues and technology have advanced quite a bit since then, so I will be showing you cold molding, which you are more likely to encounter. It's also very easy to do, just like the composites with the fiberglass. It's really it's within your grasp of skills and availability financially to do this kind of thing. Okay, so let's see what else. Some advantages of cold molding over steam bending is that once this is all cured up, it's a lot more stable than steam bent wood. Steam bent wood can relax over time and straighten out. Also, if it's heated up enough, it can bend in the wrong direction, whereas this is quite stable that way. This can be a lot stronger because you have, in this case, a dozen pieces of wood, and you can check the quality of the grain. You can see that there's no fault in each of the pieces of grain. And so if there is, for some reason, a fault in one of the pieces, you still have the other 11 holding everything together. With a solid piece of wood, let's say it was a solid piece of oak and you bent it like this, if there was a flaw in the wood, you might not see it until after you bent it and installed it, or after it was doing its job, and it might fail. That happens a lot in old wooden boats, where they used to make the frames of the boat were made out of oak, and a lot of times they have to be replaced because over time they can crack. Whereas a glued up piece is less likely to crack than a steam bent one. This also costs a lot less to do, even though you've got the additional expense of epoxy into the mix here. Buying veneer like this, it's a lot cheaper, even for volumes like this, than it is to try to buy solid wood that's nice and clear. And that's simply because over the last 100 years or so, we've used up all the good stuff. All the good wood is either too expensive or gone. So this is a really good alternative to using solid wood to make things this way. So like I said, what they make out of this stuff now is furniture. They make boats out of this. They make some airplanes out of this. Architectural structures, you'll see in great open spaces, sometimes they use wooden beams that are laminated out of much thicker pieces than this, making a beam sometimes this tall and maybe that wide by 20 meters or so. And that's made the same way we're going to be making this. Okay. Also, plywood is made out of this stuff. Much bigger sheets, yes, but it's made out of this stuff. Okay, so where do we start? I have two different types of wood here. I have a maple and I have a cherry. And we're going to use both of these to make up our laminate. And the reason why we're doing both is because if you have several options of doing it. You can get it so that you get these nice alternate stripes of the different colors of wood. You can do it one layer, you can alternate each layer. You can go 2 layers of one, 2 of the other. You can have all of your layers of cherry next to each other and then all of your layers of maple next to each other. That's up to you. Go nuts, do whatever you'd like. I'm going to show you the alternating method. We are going to be forming this wood into this shape on this mold. Everyone will get one of these, right? And you can see that that's how this was formed, right? We started with mold here. We glue everything up, and then it takes a little while, but you can put it on there and we'll clamp it down with these blocks. This mold has Mylar tape on it so that the epoxy won't stick to the wood. And this piece of plastic has been waxed so that we have a better chance of removing it without it sticking to everything. Okay, so you remember from the composite workshop, we had our friends epoxy A and B. I'm going to put my glasses on now. I've got my gloves, I've got my sleeves, and I'm going to do, I know that I can put 2 pumps in here without filling up the cup. So here's 1 and 2. And if you'll remember from last time as well, 1, 2. Cleanliness is very important. You have to consider that when you're doing this, you probably have hands that are covered with epoxy. So don't check your Facebook on your phone. Don't run your hands through your hair. Don't eat or drink anything without taking your gloves off. And careful to not spill it on the floor. We don't want to track this all over the world either. And I'm wearing an apron because if this stuff gets on your clothes, it will harden up, and then eventually you'll have a hole wherever the fibers just start to work and break. So I have several shirts and pairs of pants that have holes in them from epoxy. Okay, so I have my epoxy. I'm going to start with a light colored piece of wood, the maple. Move this out of the way so you can see it. Because this is the first piece, I only need to put epoxy on one side because the other side will be facing the mold. Although since it's sitting on wet epoxy right now, it'll probably be plenty wet. I'm taking my next piece. This is a dark piece. This is the cherry. I'm doing that on both sides. I can actually put it in place and do the next coat. You don't need to slather it on too thick. I think I might have put a little bit too much on, but it's important that you get the entire surface covered because any gaps in the coverage will be the weak point. So here's another of the light colored pieces of maple. I'm putting these all together so that they're bending the same way. This material comes on a roll, so when I unroll it, it maintains some of its curl. I'm lining them all up the same way just because it's going to be a lot easier for me to deal with. Again, another darker layer of cherry. You can see the color change too when I put the resin on. The maple tends to stay the same color, but the cherry gets quite a bit darker. The maple is a harder wood, and the pores are more closed, so they don't. The pores of the wood don't absorb as much of the epoxy below the surface, so the color doesn't change as much. And don't worry if you get some of the laminates in the wrong order, or if you want to take it apart and change it so it looks different, go right ahead. As long as the epoxy isn't cured up. Oh, I did that on the wrong side, didn't I? I have to get the convex side so it'll fit into my stack. If you wanted to take this stack apart, rearrange it so that it fits, it you know, meets your artistic sensibilities, by all means do that. Just keep in mind that the epoxy will cure in probably, it'll cure to the point where you can't do anything with it in about 20 minutes. So maybe half an hour. So most of you will have just enough time to get this thing together. So maybe you want to practice your color arrangements before you mix up your glue. And if you remember from last time, I'm mixing this on a piece of plastic on the table so that I don't ruin the table. So if you're interested in buying this veneer to do a project, you'll notice, or I can see it because I'm here, the backside of the cherry has some sort of fiber backing, some sort of paper maybe, and that indicates to me that cherry probably splits if you just cut it this thin and don't put a backing on it. And you can tell it's got a backing because it's overlapped right here, where one piece of backing ended and another piece of backing started. So if you want this to be a visual layer of whatever you're going to build in the future, just make sure that if it does have that backing on it, that you know what side it's on, and you can plan to have that other side be exposed, because that's where the visual beauty of the wood comes through. The maple, by contrast, does not have that backing. I suspect it's a much tougher wood and it doesn't need it. You can also buy these veneers with a hot melt glue already on the back. And you could, if you were going to build furniture or something like a shelf with plywood, you can use a piece of this veneer with the hot melt glue attached to it, and you can use an iron or a heat gun, some sort of hot press, and attach it to the end grain of the plywood to make it look better. Okay, last piece. I only need to put it on the mating side. I don't need to get epoxy on both sides of this piece because it's going to be up against the mold or up against the blocks, so it doesn't need glue on that side. If I want everything to look consistent afterwards, like after it comes, when it's in this form here, then I can go ahead and cover the whole thing with epoxy. So you'll notice I'm going to put this one on backwards, and that's because I want the beauty side out. Oh, I did that wrong. Yes, I did. Okay, I put the glue on the wrong side. Okay, my bad. So we're gonna clean my hands off. Okay, so now I've squeezed the ends together so that everything's lined up this way and this way. And I'm going to put this on the mold. I'm lining everything up so that right in this corner here, all the layers join up. I don't know if you can get in here and see this, Ben. Lining up all the ends right there as best I can. Doesn't need to be perfect. I just want most of them right in place. Okay, that's where we're going to start our bend. Now I'm going to take this clamp block and using a screw that's already in place. I'm gonna try to avoid the hole that's already there. I'm gonna put that right there, squeeze it, and you'll see the glue come out, right? And then down it goes. Good. Now, what am I gonna do next? I'm gonna move this. I'm gonna get my epoxy out of the way so I don't make a huge mess. Not as huge a mess as I could make. This next block is going to get pushed right up in here. Just like that. And if you need a helper to do this, by all means, team up. We probably don't have enough screwdriver guns for everybody to do this at the same time, so you're going to be waiting for a tool to become available. So help your neighbor, help your partner out, and hold this thing while they use the drill. And then when it's your turn, you can use the drill and they can hold it. This might not conform exactly to the mold, and that's okay. When you do something where really high quality conformity to the mold is required, then I can certainly help you with that. In this case, it's not required. So I keep wiping my hands off on the paper towel or the rag every time I do this, so that I don't wind up with a drill that's completely covered with epoxy. I know it's going to get covered with epoxy, but I'm trying to minimize it because I'm the one who cleans it off. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. And do on the end what we want this to conform in there. And one way to do that is to put this on here. This should be part of the mold, but I made the mold wrong. I didn't know that I needed that until after I needed it. So this last one is going to go right in here. And you notice that these have all been put in sort of where I thought they would be needed, and I put them in right along that edge. In this case, I'm going to see if I can get the corner in there so that the corner will do the work and push it in. This is the only part of the mold that's concave. Okay, good. Now, I'm going to clean the glue off. I don't want the glue to get down in between the mold and the piece. And I also want to press this down so that all the layers are on the same level. And then with a paper towel, I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. Cleanliness is key. The more you keep the epoxy off this stuff, yes, I know it's unavoidable. You are going to get epoxy on the mold. That is kind of the whole point. But avoid getting pools of epoxy everywhere, and you'll have a much better time taking it off the mold and cleaning it up afterwards. So now I'm looking around to see how I did, and I think some of this needs to go down farther. There we go. I'm pressing it down farther. I can see a lot of epoxy squeezing out of the bottom, which is unavoidable, but I think it's more important to have the wood pressed all the way down than it is to get it perfectly clean, although perfectly clean would be a wonderful addition. I go in with my little square tool and scrape off the epoxy. Of course, you can't get it where it hides behind the blocks, but that's okay, we'll get most of it. Okay, and so this is what I'm trying to prevent, is a gap under there. I'm trying to push that down. That looks pretty good. Okay, this is good. Now we're gonna let it sit overnight, and then we can take it out of the mold, or what's called demolding. So you might be asking, why on earth are we making this shape? Sure, it's a good demonstration of bending, but what's up with that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to, in our second workshop on cold molding, we're going to cut this right down the middle. We'll show you how to do that. We'll help you do it. Then we're going to sand the edges so that they're nice and flat, so that they're flat like this, right? And then we glue it together into a heart. See, it's the IDM heart. Isn't that nice? Yeah. A little corny, but it's a good demonstration. Thanks.